matters before we begin. First of all, Wes has started the live stream throughout the World Wide Web. We are now in over 71 countries, 7 continents, and in all 50 states with this broadcast. So we know our viewing audience is going to go up because of some of the people we have in the audience. But to that end, I would ask that anybody who's speaking, including staff, that you speak clearly into the microphone, slowly and certainly articulate so it can be picked up on our World Wide Web presentation. Secondly, I want to remind everyone that this is a non-voting meeting, and we do have a board member as per our policy on remote. That board member is Mr. Kinsemi. He is on remote, and I think he's in good stead. Ray? Good evening, Mr. Kinsemi. Can you hear us?
Members, thank you very much for allowing me to attend this meeting this way.
Good to hear your voice, and we hope you're feeling better, and we wish you well. I wanted to make just 2 recognitions before we begin. First, we have a very important guest in the audience that I haven't had a chance to catch up with, but the Principal Emeritus of the Niagara Falls City School District has chosen to join us this evening, so there's additional pressure on the first presenter. But I'd just like to say hello to Mr. Stan Zimmerman. Stan, how are you? And on a serious note, Stan, congratulations for everything you've done for the monument at Hyde Park. It is beautiful, it is meaningful, and I know you've had a lion's share of the responsibility for doing that. So congratulations on your work with the monument at Hyde Park. It's really quite impressive. Congratulations. The other person I wanted just to recognize from the microphone before we begin is Kevin Edwards. Kevin, everybody knows Kevin? Wave, Kevin. Kevin Edwards is the victim of the year in terms of audits. He keeps going through audits. He just finished his summer audit, clean bill of health. Next week he has Gaskill, LaSalle Prep, and Bond School. So Kevin, I wanted to thank you publicly in front of the board and the viewing audience for your work on the audits. And I also wanted to thank you for doing a couple things that are way beyond your scope of duty. You have been providing meals to our athletes before they've been going away on some trips. And I just wanted to say, and I know sometimes you're coming in at 3, 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and Kevin has never said no. Never said no, even if it's a small group of 20 or 25 kids, and he'll continue to do that. So I just wanted to publicly thank you in front of everybody, Kevin, for feeding our kids. We appreciate you doing that and going the extra mile. So thank you, Kevin. We have a pretty packed agenda. Tonight we're going to have a school present, then we're going to get into some finances with our school budget and the results of our internal audit, and we'll conclude after that with the agenda review. Mr. President and members of the board, I don't believe we'll need an executive session for any reason at all this evening, so hopefully we'll move smartly through this agenda. So I'd like to begin with our first presentation, and I just wanted to introduce it in this way. Gaskill Prep, I've asked Gaskill Prep to make a presentation from their leadership team of Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Briglio, because each and every Wednesday, the central office team gets to hear from a different school. And we were particularly impressed with the work of the Gaskill Prep School Improvement Plan. And just like a couple of weeks ago, we had Abbott here. And speaking quite frankly and quite honestly, something that bothers me very much about Gaskill is that it often is perceived in the incorrect light. You could walk into Gaskill at any time, any day, and find that to be the most well-run, finely operated school with learning going on in a safe environment of any school, not just in Niagara Falls, but around. And I wanted to highlight Gaskill because if we're being honest with each other, the perception doesn't match the reality. It does not match the reality. And the reality is it is a fine school. They have some challenges to work on, but they're addressing everything head on. I also want to say, before I introduce Mr. Zimmerman, it's pretty indicative to me that when we have a presentation that really just features the principal and assistant principal, that many staff members that are behind you come to support the presentation on Gaskill. What it tells me, looking at those faces, and I'm sure there are others who wish they could be here but couldn't for certain personal or family reasons, the culture of Gaskill Prep School is a good, warm, welcoming culture of people who care. People who care and people who came out to support their administrative team. So to the staff, your presence here really says a lot. Your presence says an awful lot about how you feel about your school, and I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you. So congratulations what you're doing over there. To the staff, I'd say keep it up, stay the course, you're on the right track, and good things are coming. Having said that, I'd really like to call their principal and assistant principal, Derek Zimmerman, who this week alone has purchased a couple of new sport coats. I think this is a repeat. I've seen this sport coat before, but Derek came in earlier in this week to help us with something, and he was looking very dapper in an all-weather, all-season sport coat. So I just wanted to also compliment you on how you've picked up your dress. It means a lot, really, in terms of professionalism. But otherwise, Derek, seriously, really proud of your work. Really proud of your work. And not to be corny, but your dad should be really proud of your work. You've done a great job with that school, as has your assistant principal, Mr. Briglio. So what we'd like to do is take about 20 to 25 minutes letting Derek do what some other schools have done and show you where they are, where they're going, and some of the challenges and how they're going to address them. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. It's an all-season sport coat.
Sorry.
Stretchy material, JCPenney, 25% off if anyone's interested. It's a game changer for me, and it will be for you.
So I won't interrupt you again, but tomorrow you'll find something in your mail that is a sentence to be transferred to the CEC. So enjoy it there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. And it started off perfectly in there having a little bite to eat, and Ms. Dunn came up to me and said, you know, I want to share a story. I ran into a student at McDonald's down on 17th Street, and she said, hey, you know, where do you go to school? And the young man said, I go to Gaskill. And she said, well, why are you walking this far? You know, why are you going this far? She said, well, I should be going to LaSalle, but, you know, I chose to stay at Gaskill because I wanted to be there. And to me, that's what this presentation's all about. We have 17 students. It doesn't sound like a lot, but 17 students that asked special permission to be at Gaskill. And to me, that's huge. In only the 4 years that I've been there, that number has risen, and I hope that it continues to rise. And that's no dig on LaSalle Prep. They're an amazing school as well, but I think that we do a lot of special things at Gaskill that is unique and different to our building. And I want to thank the board members, the superintendent, Mr. Corella, Ms. Massaro, for all the support that you've given us, and the resources, the staffing. Sometimes you think I'm crazy, but and I know that the Board of Ed is very cognizant on, you know, budget and, you know, return on investment. And throughout today's presentation, I think that will prove that there's not a penny wasted at Gaskill Prep. So I appreciate that. And I want to start by reviewing really quickly our school comprehensive education plan and how it's based on our school's area in need of improvement and also their unique challenges. So obviously we would have to identify our challenges. Some of them are out of our control, like every school, but we identify those challenges and then we create our asset plan. With the ESSA plan, we need a committee. So we put together a committee of counselors, teachers, deans, leadership team, along with the data from students and from parents.
It was perfect, though.
Mr. Consemi going to join me?
He's with us.
Is he there?
He's with us.
So, it's a cumulative group. It is collaboration. It is not a top-down approach to this school improvement plan. It is input from everybody so that everyone feels a sense of ownership with our school improvement plan and its strategies. So after we have that ESSA plan created over the summertime, it's time to start building in supports based on resources that we have available to us. And then it's working the plan. Work the plan. And to me, working the plan means accountability. And I think I have a lot of groups of folks to hold accountable for continuing, their job and doing what we need to do to move forward in our goals. And then we measure our ESSIP through multiple means: data, hard data, soft data, and comments and surveys and a lot of different areas, and you'll see a few of them tonight. And obviously, we celebrate our accomplishments. So thank you again for allowing me to do that. And I want to start by sharing our commitments. I know it's pretty hard to see up there, but I'd like to read. With our committee, we came up with 2 commitments. One of them supports social emotional learning. The other one supports instructional leadership and instructional practices in the classroom. And you'll see many overlaps in the 2 commitments. The first one is that we commit that every child and staff member feels safe, celebrated, respected, supported, and has a true sense of belonging. This commitment was developed to build a strong, trusting relationships with adults and peers, which promotes emotional well-being and the necessity to develop the awareness and self-management skills that's essential to the success in the school and in life. So for commitment 1, we develop a whole slew of strategies, right? How are we going to accomplish that commitment? And we've put together a student support center. What this is, when we have students in crisis, whether it's attendance, whether it's behavior, emotional, social emotional, and obviously they manifest that in numerous different ways, we like to approach that from a multi-tiered system. So if a student gets in trouble in class, we try to drill down to the root cause of what's really going on with that child. And I think our social workers, along with our counselors and deans, they create this student support center to cumulatively try to deal with problems that our students are coming in with. So we also continue to expand our extended day programming with multiple different extracurricular and academic programs that we have after school, not only creating a safe place for them to stay from 3:30 or 5 o'clock, but also shows them a sense of belonging and groups of kids that they can surround themselves with that have common interests and goals. We have a check and connect attendance program. What that is we look at our neediest kids according to attendance, and we connect them with a trusted adult in the building to make a rapport with them so that adult can check on that student every single day, whether they're there or not. And that has made tremendous effects on a lot of different things in our building, not only attendance. So we have a lot of awesome adults, as you see here. Every single one of them check on specific kids every single day to make sure that they're there. A couple years ago, I remember looking at a survey, and students would go through the entire day not having a conversation with an adult. And that, to me, stood out, and it's pretty sad. We share that information with teachers, and that's why we have programs like this in place. They need to have at least one trusted adult in the school, if not multiple. What's that? It can be a Google message, a Microsoft Teams chat, or a phone call. Yeah, multiple measures. Yep. Yeah, if you want to stop me anytime during the presentation, I don't mind stopping and answering questions while we go through this, or at the end, whatever's easier for you. Another strategy to support our first commitment is school-wide approaches to inclusive building culture, and that's really just a shared decision-making. In our PDs and our faculty meetings, we are continuously asking staff for feedback. We don't have all the best ideas. They're the classroom experts, and and we have some amazing teachers, and we call on them very often to help us. And I think that there's that sense of ownership within the building is something that not only we practice, but we want them to practice in their classrooms and giving students ownership to their learning as well. So commitment 2, more of an instructionally based one, is that we commit to support an engaging learning environment and foster instructional practices that assist teachers and administration in cultivating a building culture that is inclusive to the needs of students, staff, faculty, and administration. This commitment supports our vision because our instructional practices are going to harness our cultural differences, building student ownership of their learning. So some strategies we've put in place for commitment 2 are social emotional approaches for instruction. What we do is we try to have every single teacher be trauma informed. They also include mindful moments in classrooms, and we have trainings to teach teachers how to incorporate these practices within their classroom and within their lessons, and that's something that you're going to see when we share some of the PDs that we perform at school. School-wide engagement strategies, we know this is something that our teachers need and our students need, because students just learn differently now, and they need to be engaged for 48 minutes. And we could have just given a menu of 37 engagement techniques and said, here you go, try some. But instead, we had our staff choose a few to get really good at, and we own that process, and we own those engagement strategies, and they are using them with fidelity every day and getting better at it. Student-led opportunities within the building, more student-centered instruction, and utilizing data to inform instruction is very important to us. So in order to see if this is working and we're headed in the right direction, we need to measure our information, right? We need to measure our plan. So this is only one means to measuring, and we gave this survey mid-year, and we decided last minute to include it because I think it's some pretty amazing data to share. We put out a survey to a very large sample of students and a very large sample of teachers. And with that survey, it came back and said 100% of the staff that completed this survey reported that they feel supported at Gaskill. Makes me feel great. 87.5% of our staff feel comfortable making suggestions to the leadership team. Student survey, 82.3% of the surveyed students report that they like coming to school. 78.3% of the surveyed students report that they feel included in school. 68.4% of surveyed students report that there is an adult in the building that they feel comfortable talking with. And 67.9% of the surveyed students feel people at Gaskill Preparatory School care about them. I wanted to share that information. That's a baseline, right? That's that we have to continue to improve on those numbers, but they're really good. They're really good, and we're going to continue to work and improve on that because we want everyone to come to Gaskill and enjoy being there, just like the kid that Ms. Dunn saw at McDonald's. This next slide, it's very difficult to see. This is a slide that we decided to put into our data dashboard that we present at Evolution because we felt it was so important to share. So with strategies, commitments, how do we train our staff to be able to carry out some of these things that we need to practice during the school day? This is a slew. Can you guys see it better on your screens? Oh.
E, M, C, A, F. Oh, it's like the eye chart before my cataract test.
Well, I'm not the AV guy. Who's the AV guy? I apologize. Because I wish you could read this. Anyway.
Well, tell us what it says.
I'm going to. So this is our month-to-month PD schedule that we built at Gaskill Prep School with the help of the leadership team, Miss Highland behind me, I'm sure she's here, the amazing instructional coach. We looked at the areas that we need to improve on at Gaskill and built our PDs and cluster meetings and grade level meetings around our needs. And you can't see, but you can envision that in September that we touch on a lot of, beginning school year, cluster protocols and, getting the teams and clusters ready to go, expectations, and then we start to work into some of our strategies and how we're going to roll those out. Now, this is a document that it has a lot of depth, and I'll email you the document so that you can look at the different PDs that we've put together at school. But all of these trainings happen during the school day. The prep level schedule lends itself to a time in the morning that we can free up groups of teachers for 40 minutes, and we can meet with them on any topic we want. So I could tell you from Monday through Friday, if we have enough staff in the building, and it really attributes to having a couple extra building-based substitutes and increased attendance by teachers, that we can have these meetings every single day. And our cluster meetings and our grade level meetings and our engagement strategy meetings, our SEL meetings to go over all these programs that we have running in the building, they're effective and they're quality-driven, data-driven meetings, and it can be changed, they can be extended, they can be expanded, and we spend as much time on those as we need to. So when you get this, you could take a look at it if you have any questions. I want to highlight a couple different things that we do that's pretty unique to Gaskill, is we have a group called Instructional Ambassadors. And what this is a group of veteran teachers. Some of them aren't very veteran, they've only been there a few years, but they're amazing at what they do. And when we're in classrooms evaluating and doing walkthroughs, we're just sharing good practices with other teachers. But how impactful would it be for a teacher to walk into another teacher's classroom and see their colleague working and seeing the engagement strategies working firsthand, right? Instead of coming from my mouth and tell you, hey, what I saw was, instead we're starting to get to where teachers feel comfortable having their colleagues come in the room. The collaboration that comes from this instructional ambassador team is amazing. They are shaping and molding some of our newer teachers in that mindset that it's okay to share practices and it's okay to share resources just to get better at what you do. We did something unique this year, and we had student shadow experiences. So we would have a staff member follow a student all day to live the life of a middle school student. They would be with them all day long. They would eat the lunch. They would sit in the classrooms, and the feedback that came from those shadows was amazing, something that I've never seen in the 23 years that I've been in education. And the teachers that did the shadows reported things back like, hey, the 4-minute passing time really isn't about passing. It's really about a break. It's a brain break. It's an opportunity for a breather to talk to their friends. Getting from one point to another is only a small part of it. They need a break. So it also came up, a teacher said, I will structure my lessons differently based on the information I got from doing this shadow today. There's more collaboration happening amongst teams. If you have more activities going on in your classroom one particular day that requires students to sit in their seats for 45, 48 minutes, I hope that another teacher has some instructional strategies that get kids up and moving. Because if you have to sit every single period after period, they get tired. And they get exhausted, and they stop working. Adults who have master's degrees said, by the time 7th period hit, I couldn't pay attention to one word that teacher was saying. And that was impactful. So we have a chart going for what teachers can do now, what we could start planning over the summer, and what we can institute in September that addresses some of those findings from our student shadows. And it's been amazing, and we continue to do it. And more teachers are signing up to shadow students. The next slide is also probably pretty hard to read. This one is a menu of support systems that we have at Gaskill. And I'm sorry if I go over time, but it's important to share this with you. We address social, emotional, academic, attendance, and we also want to encourage positive behavior. And you notice this chart is red, yellow, and green. These are a menu of resources that we offer students that our social emotional team, our leadership team, our teachers have at their disposal to address Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 students. And I'll explain what that means in a second. These are resources that you approve. You've approved some of these groups to come into our building and run mentoring programs, share resources, And I could tell you that every single one of them is utilized on a daily basis. And again, it's a slide that has a lot of depth, and you could probably, take a look at it, 15, 20 minutes. And if when I send this to you by email, if you have any questions regarding any one of these interventions, please feel free to email me.
Well, I think it's really good, too, because board members have been approached by people in the community. I don't want to speak for them, but they say, well, there's no service, there's no linkage. Having this at their fingertips and disposal allows two things. One, the board members now see in action what they vote on in their resolutions. And two, arm them with information and responses. If you go to Gaskill, have you looked at this? Have you accessed that? So it's a powerful slide.
Yeah, and how we have these menu of interventions. How do we identify kids and where do they fall in this tiered process? This slide right here really has drastically changed my outlook on mental health. So in 2021-22, you'll notice that we had students categorized as Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Now, your Tier 1 students it's everybody, right? It's almost everybody. Tier 2 students are your medium risk students. They're starting to miss school a little bit, maybe have some discipline issues, maybe have some home issues going on. Your Tier 3 students are your neediest, highest risk students. These are students that really have experienced some trauma, and the numbers, they change. They go back and forth. A student could become a Tier 3 overnight, right? A death in the family, wham, they're a Tier 3 right away. You'll notice that in 2022-23, these numbers are way up, right? They're way up because we got better at identifying them. Not because they didn't exist, but I think, I'm probably sick of hearing COVID, but with COVID, students were very reserved. We didn't speak to them as much, and the relationships continue to get stronger in the building. And I strongly believe that the presence of our social workers have played a huge role in identifying students in these three categories. Now, you think 54, that's really not a bad number. These are 54 of the most neediest kids in our building. You know that Gaskill is made up of numerous students from fractured homes, single-parent homes, foster homes, and no homes. Homeless kids, we have a list of homeless kids that would amaze you, right? The number of students that are coming up during START meetings that are experiencing major trauma. The things that they're involved in the community is something I could never imagine. There's students that are self-harming every single day, and I don't mean to take a turn with this presentation, but it's important. Every START meeting we have weekly, our social workers or counselors are identifying another student that self-harms. They're hurting themselves, or one of their friends have reported that another friend did it. So that brought up a long discussion in our START meeting. And we came to the conclusion that I don't think the number of students that are self-harming has really drastically increased. I think their comfort level has increased. That now they have someone to talk to. They have someone to reach out to. The check and connect. It's coming through different ways. A science teacher reported the other day that a young lady ingested some pills, right? We addressed it. She felt comfortable enough with that staff member that she can open up to that staff member, and then we can go to our social worker who could then contact crisis services, that's a Tier 3 intervention, and address that student right away. These social workers are on the phone sometimes till 10 o'clock at night, working with students that are going through some very, very difficult things. And the next chart you see down, the table that you see with counselors and social workers, 2022-23, I want to show you this because I think it speaks volumes. Only 32 students were referred by teachers to the START team, and that 32 are students that are referred to the START team most likely for special ed services, right? Academics. 54 students are scheduled on a weekly basis to visit their school counselor. These are counseling sessions that happen weekly with students on a regular basis. More than 75 students come to see a counselor or social worker every single week. Every single week, 75 kids. It's a lot to manage in a building because people assume that kids are wandering and they're going there. These students are going there for real life problems. They're going to talk to a trusted adult. Why? Because they're getting feedback from their friends that our social workers and counselors and deans are helping them through these difficult situations. They have 57 check-ins. That's 57 students that they check in with every single day. Hey, you here today? Great. You need a pair of socks, you need a pair of underwear, what do you need? Let's go. Let's go to room 220. We're going to get you some clean clothes. We're going to do this. Oh, you need your hair done? Great. We're going to take you up to hair club in the morning. We're going to get your hair done. We have some products up there. We can help you out. That's not an issue anymore. You don't have to think of your self-image. Let's get your hair done. Let's do that. Let's go to class, right? These are high-need students, so we need a lot of resources. 140 social workers caseload. This is how many students our social workers see on a regular basis. They share a report of students that they see on a weekly basis. 140. And right now we have a social worker on maternity leave, and we're feeling the pressure. And that's not an ask at all because, Miss Douglas and Miss Wilkins, they would work 20 hours a day if there was 20 hours a day allowed to them. And there'd be enough work to go around. So their work, along with counselors' work, along with dean's work, we're addressing more mental health issues than ever before, and I think that attributes to some of the numbers that you're going to see on suspension data and attendance data. 20-plus home visits that just that group has done alone. We go right to the home. Outside agencies that we have used, 61, and this number is probably in the 70s by now because this was probably completed a couple weeks ago. Truancy referrals, we have made 54 to date, and CPS referrals, 25 to date. Our next slide shows some support in what we're trying to do to change the image and perception at Gaskill, and this is our family and community engagement. We need to get parents in the building. We need to get the parents, we need to get board members in the building to see the hard work that we're doing. Celebrate students. Parents love to come in and celebrate students. This is one way that we can show parents that Gaskill, it's a lot different than maybe when they went there or when their relatives went there or what they hear. We need them to get in the building to experience it themselves. So I wanted to share that with you too. So in summary, we want to share just some of our responses or answers to our challenges. Our first commitment and strategies focus on creating an environment where students feel welcomed and they want to be here, and it has had a huge positive impact on chronic absenteeism. There are many other factors for absenteeism that are out of our control that we will continue to work towards to try to get kids to school on time and try to get the kids in the building. As you know, that Gaskill is a neighborhood school, and a large majority of our students walk to school. So if it's raining, our absenteeism goes up just because it's raining. If it's snowing, forget about it, right? Only so many kids have transportation to get there. We only have a few buses, so the kids that are walking to school, it drastically affects their ability to get to school when the weather isn't cooperating. SIP number 2 includes engagement and data-driven instructional strategies as well as restorative practices that have drastically reduced student suspensions and student discipline incidences. To date, student discipline incidences have declined 56%. That number is huge to us. Student suspensions have declined 57%. And I think this is hard data, right? The soft data is when you see kids self-advocating and working out problems themselves. They're coming down and saying, you need to call this girl down here or this boy down here. We need to have a conversation. A couple years ago, you probably know how that was going to go. They know that there are other ways and alternatives to handling issues and handling conflict. So our students are becoming much more educated on more effective ways. And the more educated we can help them become through tools that our social workers, our counselors and our deans have shared with them and strategies that they've shared with them, they're getting better at self-regulation and self-advocacy and being more aware of their own emotions and being able to address them. And our counselors and social workers' ability to identify at-risk students as well as access a complete menu of SEL services has allowed them to better assist students in crisis and mental health issues. The increasing number of family and community engagement events and activities has helped to establish a positive social media presence that celebrates the accomplishments of Gaskill Prep School students and teachers, which in turn has helped to increase parent buy-in as well as improve the overall community and perception of Gaskill. And I have to be honest, I'm merely a coach to a phenomenal team that the superintendent has supported and put together for me. So that's my approach to leadership, and these folks behind me prove that. So I want to thank you again for putting me in charge of Gaskill, and thank you so much for coming here and supporting me, and we'll continue to move forward. Any questions?
Go ahead, is it Paul or Dan?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I am completely impressed, but more so, I walk in the building and I can see it, I can feel it. Everything that's done at Gaskill is done with intentionality. There's nothing that's left to chance. There's nothing that's not thought out. I'm impressed with the intentionality of both your academic, safety, and social emotional programs. And you've thought through everything. And I know you've got areas to improve on. You're the first to admit that. Mm-hmm. But with your leadership and the team that you have behind you, I think some of those numbers are just astounding. And I think the main reason why I wanted you to show the board, and hopefully those that are watching, is that Gaskill is a good place, Gaskill is a safe place, and Gaskill is a place where student achievement is going to continue to rise. I couldn't be more pleased with your work, the leadership of your team, and I thank you very much, and just say, let's keep after it. Let's keep after it, let's keep after it, let's keep after it.
Absolutely, appreciate it.
And I'm just waiting for the day when it's dressed like Mr. Zimmerman Day, and the kids come in with their sport coats on.
The old Mr. Zimmerman or the new one?
Well, I don't want them to have those beards so they look like Kenny Rogers or whoever he thinks he is. But no, really, Derek, great job, John. And to the teachers, I just wanted to say your presence really makes a difference, because you can see that you're with the team, and you are one team, and makes all the difference in the world. So thank you, giving you our support. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep working really hard, and we're going to go to good places at Gaskill. A little bit later in the evening, and you may be gone by now, just as an aside, Gaskill's robotics program is even starting to pick up and gain attention, and they haven't left anything unturned. So I'm really pleased to see that and to see where you're going. Congratulations. Yeah, clap for yourselves. So I'll just pick on one staff member. In 1996, I was a vice principal there, and I walked through the halls, and I kept finding the student in the hallway, and I wasn't having much success getting him into class. And I said, if I see you in the hall one more time, I'm going to give you a radio, and you could be a safety officer. 15 years later, Rasheen Wilson becomes a safety officer. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that a few years later, he goes back to school and becomes a teaching assistant and keeps bettering himself. And I'm just picking on you because I have watched you from a 14-year-old to a man who is really part of that mission. And I wish I could call a story about all of you out. I know something about all of you, but as I look at you, Rasheen, I just can't forget that day when I couldn't get you out of the hall. And now you're doing what I was doing, so congratulations. You're welcome. We have thrilling additional topics if you'd like to stay, especially maybe Mr. Jacklin, because, no, you're shaking your head, because we have the best We have the best financial team anywhere, led by Becky and a young lady named Julie Jacqueline. And I'm going to call them to the microphone for 3 areas of finance, if we may. Lou, you better stay. Where are you going? She wants you out? You have to make dinner. Go pick something up off the shelf there. They're on it. They are. So let me give you my preamble, and then we'll let Becky and Julie get after it. We have 3 different presentations. We're going to do the budget first. So as soon as Becky sits, hey Duke, it was good to see you. Thank you. So we have 3 financial presentations to make to you this evening. The first one is your budget. I have to tell you, I'm getting very comfortable with the final number. On the 30th, you'll see a resolution to approve that final number. We believe that the revenues are pretty solid. We also appreciate both the House and the Senate coming out with their bills this week, and there are a couple of things that I wanted to recognize on the governmental level that I am pleased to see. One is that the House and the Senate both approved fully funding of foundation aid, and that's what we're reflecting here. I want to applaud the House and Senate for going over to that line that says high impact tutoring, where we're slated to get $1.5 million. It's the House and Senate of the legislator of the state government who is saying, take it out of that line and put it back into foundation aid and don't put the restrictions on it. I think that's a good move by our legislators. And finally, I want to applaud our House and Senate for helping to eliminate the amount of double reporting that this team has to do. They've got to fill out 2 reports for 2 different agencies, but they say the same thing. The only thing that I haven't seen from the government that I wish would be addressed is the remainder of the charter school cap being opened. And as my position on that is certainly well known. I don't think it's a good thing, and I would hope that there would be some movement there. But bottom line is, what Julie is going to go through with you is any of the green. Tonight, green indicates change, and I'll turn it over to Julie Jacqueline, our budget manager.
So there was no changes on the revenue side, as Mr. Laurie mentioned. And on the appropriation side, there are 6 amounts that are shaded in green, so those do represent changes from last time. The first is just being transportation. First Student added additional bus runs in January and February, which is a good sign. So we wanted the budget to reflect that additional number of bus runs for next year. Probably the largest change is this next line, the tuitions, specifically the out of district. Previously, we were estimating an increase of 5%. As we're starting to see some of these rate increases come through, they're really coming in more at about 8 or 9%. So we increased that to 9%, which amounted to an increase of $415,000 in that budget line. But we want to make sure we reflect that as we do anticipate those rates will go up. The BOCES line, that continues to change just as Ray and I meet and go through participation, selecting which services we're going to participate in through Orleans Niagara on Erie 1. And the Health Active, previously we were assuming a 5% increase in the rates. We ended up assuming a blended 3% increase, which amounted to actually a decrease from last presentation. So total dollar-wise, that budget line decreased $132,000. And we did receive the final rates from New York 44 this week. The family increased 4.5%, but the single was 1.5%, and the enrollee and spouse was 1%. So overall, that 3% is where we need to be for the rates. The next line is we previously had in there a pilot for Apple products K through 2. We had put $50,000 in there, but we are able to purchase those through Smart Schools Bond Act. So that's the mechanism we're going to be using to fund those. So that came out of the general fund budget. And finally, the building condition survey, that was in there at $250,000, which was an estimate at the time. Now that cost is going to be $212,000. So overall, the total change remained the same, and that bottom budget number of 181,504,208 remained stable. It was really just a shift of the expenses.
Yeah, and if you scroll up, I worry, first of all, that we have cleaned out the ARP, the American Rescue Fund grant. There are no people in that program. They're all moved back into the budget. And if you slide just a little, Ray, to the side, now the other way, the slide, you can see, and go down, there you go. You can see that when you compare budget to budget, this is high. We're up 7.73% from last year. But when you compare it to the CPI in March, we're right in line. And the CPI in March was 7.91,
Yes.
a rate I've never seen that high in my, since 2008 when I've been working on this. Because I watched the amount and I want to make sure that we're not out of whack, and we kind of use the CPI as a benchmark. If you scroll up a little bit more, Ray, so that you can see, as you know, those are your reserve funds. There has not been any change there. Those are the reserve balances that you have. Remember, the fund balance is the only unrestricted money that we have. The other ones are for specific purposes. The only thing I would like to say is that that's your tax cap calculation. I've been around everywhere because I haven't heard you indicate it, but we are going to say, unless you tell us differently, that there is no increase to the tax levy. I don't believe you need to increase the tax levy. That should be enough money to run our district. We shouldn't raise taxes again for my 7th year as superintendent. This, again, for those listening, is a budget that doesn't raise your tax levy, that doesn't cut any of the programs, including all of those great ones Mr. Zimmerman presented. There is not one current FTE or full-time equivalent who will be laid off, losing their job. There are some shifts in the budget, shifts in the way Mr. Corella might use some of the staff, shifts in this position for that, but your FTE number is staying the same, and it may grow just slightly. We've put a little bit of a cushion in there for that. It's a responsible budget. We don't believe that we're going to get much more new information, and the taxpayers will be asked on May 16th to vote on a number, and I'll be asked in 2 weeks to give you a resolution. And unless something drastic happens, that 181,504,208 looks like it's going to be the final number, with those caveats of no tax levy increase, no FTE shortage, no programs cut. Our kids need everything. You heard a wonderful presentation. Our kids need everything that they're getting. And what it also does is it maintains and adds to all of those reserve lines below the line. So God forbid, a rainy day comes or a tsunami, this board is going to be in a good position to do the best we can for kids. The last thing I'll tell you, and this number will not be known until November, but we do anticipate in this year's budget that we're currently in some monies that will not be spent. And those monies that won't be spent will roll into one of the reserve funds that you'll have some say in when Drescher and Malecki comes. It's far too early to tell you if that's going to be $1 million, $2 million, or $3 million. It's just too early. Hopefully by June we'll have a better number. What I am comfortable and confident in telling you is it will be one of those 3 numbers. So the fiscal responsibility of this year is still good. Very little change, and would open it up to questions on the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there aren't, I'd like Becky to distribute, are we going to do internal audit next?
We are.
Okay, so let me set this up a little bit. Yeah, let me set this up a little bit for the viewing audience and for the board members that weren't in the audit committee. And I'll do it once Julie is finished. And let's do this one first, Beck.
Okay.
Okay, you know we have audits all the time. But as a board, you're required to have 3 different auditors. An external audit, which we'll talk about in a minute, being Drescher Malecki. An internal audit, which we'll talk about in a couple seconds. And the internal claims auditor that you appoint every reorganizational meeting. Her name is Denise Kobler. What we wanted to show you was that in the months, and so far this school year, we have issued 1,785 checks or packets for $31 million. And she has reviewed each and every one of them, and she has only found 3 discrepancies. And we went through this with the audit committee, and as Mr. Bilson earlier pointed out, that's not 16%. That's 0.0016% of the amount of the budget. I point that out to you because halfway through the school year, we've never been better in terms of our fiscal responsibility. Becky?
No, this reflects what is happening within the district. It's everybody is cognizant of their roles, cognizant of our processes, and having everyone work as a team. When Denise reviews these claims, out of 1,785 claims, she only found 3 exceptions. 2 of those were very minor, and one was, that we used an incorrect vendor on a purchase order, like for a period of time, from September through November it was. So at that point, though, once that was discovered, the corrections have been made, and overall, you can see it's less than 1% of our total volume in terms of number and in dollars. So,
Far less.
yes.
The next issue or the next update I'd like to give you is our internal claims auditor was Denise Kobler.
Right.
Our internal auditor is a group called Bonadeo. And each year at the audit committee, of which we have 5 board members sitting on, selects an area of review. This year, the area of review was purchasing. We haven't done that in over 10 years, so the committee felt that the Bonadeo group should go very deep into purchasing. And what you have in front of you is her report, and I will summarize it and then let Becky and Julie talk about it. She looked at all of our purchasing practices and tested all of our purchasing, billing, and so forth. There is not one material weakness she found in purchasing, meaning that we do not have to write a corrective action plan, and that is really good news. Bonadeo, did find 2 areas of which they recommended that we take a closer look at. And I'll let Becky and Julie talk about those 2 areas for you.
Okay. Again, they selected purchasing, procurement, and they tested our policies, our thresholds, our vendor files, whether or not we were getting proper bids, quotes, that type of thing. And then they followed it through the payment process where the payment's being made correctly for the items that they tested. And first they took, because per our policy, we require quotes or written quotes, verbal quotes, or bids per our policy, and they took that range. So they tested 5 selections of purchases of supplies that, according to our policy, we require verbal quotes. Then they did the same per our policy to test the purchases made for services. And then they looked also at a sample for services and supplies. And the next level, which was $3,500 to just under $20,000, to make sure we had 3 written quotes or $10,000 to $35,000 for 3 written quotes of a service. Supplies greater than 20,000 and services greater than 35,000 require bids, and they also took a selection from there. Then, based on the length of time those thresholds have been in our policy and at our request, they also tested the impact if we raised some of those thresholds. So they go on to, they'll describe their finding there. And then they selected 25 check payments and tested the disbursements against the purchasing that was done to lead up to those payments. And they selected a listing of vendor addresses, and they tested to see if the vendor, I have to back up. They selected vendor addresses and tested them against the human resources addresses. So they wanted to make sure that no employees were vendors. And we do have employees as vendors. They tested 138, but they are not vendors where they receive payments for services or supplies. They receive reimbursements for items like mileage, clothing allowance, travel reimbursement when they go on conferences. And then they also compared our W-9 files to the vendor files to make sure that the information was correct and matched. So on the verbal and written quotes, they did not have any findings. However, they did recommend that we consider updating the language in our policy about professional services, because they did find it to be a little ambiguous, and they felt that based on that language, we could argue that some services didn't require a bid when they thought we needed to define that a little better, because there are some professional services that are not required to be bid. Legal, architecture, things like that, and they are specifically spelled out in school law, so we can tighten up that policy and follow that recommendation. They also noticed that even though there were no findings, that when we order curriculum instructional materials, that we have to order from certain vendors based on the curriculum we've chosen, and that consider it's a sole source, or specific curriculum or specific online textbooks have to be purchased from specific software vendors. Even though we know that we really need to put some language in the policy to define that as well, and we have a practice of bringing those purchases to the board anyway. But they're saying not all of those purchases were brought to the board via resolution. So it's going to be a combined effort of, tightening the language in the policy and also being more cognizant of bringing curriculum material purchases to the board.
Right. So there's really two major conversation points that were had from the internal audit, as I heard this. Mm-hmm. One, that the policy you approve for purchasing at the reorganization meeting can have some ambiguity in it and might need some languaging to clarify and just tighten things up. Mm-hmm. Secondly, this district has some of the most restrictive bidding thresholds that they have seen anywhere in terms of amounts. And we wanted to ask, is there any room for us to raise those bidding thresholds and still keep that same fine record of claims data? We can. Whether we do it or not is something that I need to meet with the finance team and our purchasing agent to discuss. Before we do any of that, we will have that meeting and make those recommendations. If we are to do that to you in June, they completely are comfortable with what we're doing right now. We're not illegal, we're not out of line, but because of workload and other reasons, we could have some room to raise our bidding thresholds. We will not make any change or any recommendation until the purchasing policy comes before you at the July reorganization meeting. And the only thing I can guarantee you in that is that we will tighten up the language of the purchasing policy for clarity and lack of ambiguity. Otherwise, purchasing and procurement got a clean bill of health.
Yes, and just the other items, disbursements, right, they didn't observe anything or make any recommendations on the disbursements. They did say that we're within our right and in line, we would be more in line with other districts, especially of like size, to lower those thresholds. And the vendor files, they noticed a few discrepancies, but overall, the vendor files were in good stead, and we have a plan to maintain them on a more regular basis.
So that was the upshot of the internal audit. I'm pleased to tell you again, no corrective action plan.
No.
There's one last item that I'd like Julie and Becky to address because it's timely, and I'm not sure if other school districts are doing this, but because of some conversation our board has had, I would like to ask Julie and Becky to address the recent crisis in banking and to make sure that you know the banks we use, how much money we have in the banks, and what has been done in terms of assurances with regard to this banking, I don't know, what should I call it, Mike? Banking, Mike, what should I call it? Issues? Crisis? I don't know, is it a crisis? What would you call it?
I think it's the start of it.
Okay.
It doesn't, you can't have a bank that magnitude not have conflicts in different areas of the economy. It can't be isolated.
Right.
In my opinion.
What I want you as board members to know is we're paying attention to our banks. And I've asked Julie and Becky to list for you our banks, the amount of money we have in the banks, and what's going on, because I want the viewing public and the board to know that we are being proactive and we're looking at this issue. Jewel?
So I just want to first start by saying one of the things that is different about municipal banking is that banks are required to collateralize our deposits at least 102%, which is in excess of FDIC insurance, which is not something that private businesses are subject to. So that is a requirement of any bank that we do business with. They have to have that collateral. So that's another level of assurance that we have. But we use three main banks, Chase, Bank on Buffalo, and M&T. Our main banks are Chase. That's who we do the majority of our business with. M&T does a lot of our local accounts, and then Bank on Buffalo was the most recent just because of their favorable rates in their savings account. So what we did on the spreadsheet is we obtained our bank balance as of Monday, March 14th, and then you'll see that next column, the FDIC insurance. So that applies first, and then any excess balance, the banks have to collateralize. So we obtained those collateral statements as of that day, and you can see that all of our deposits are collateralized at least 102%. We did request, our collateral statements used to come monthly. We've now requested that they come weekly so we can review those to also see what they're purchasing. So we're going to review that. And we do have Signature Bank, which that is from 4 years ago. We borrowed $650,000 to purchase new vehicles. There was about $21,000 remaining that still is unused, and so that's sitting in an escrow account, which is covered by FDIC insurance right now.
When you say collateralized, do we have liens on certain items, liens on their assets? You follow my question?
So the bank has to purchase, usually it's they purchase treasury securities in that amount or other municipal bonds.
Okay, so if a bank were to fail, we would get that first?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I would just be careful with that. This collateralization is the reason that this has happened, where they were forced to buy treasuries at a lower interest rate. And as they're going up, the value of the bonds dropped. And they're stuck in a liquidity crisis. So I would, advise that we monitor that. I mean, it may be nothing, it may be starting, who knows? But we seem to never find the truth until it happens.
Right.
And I don't want to find us on CNBC out 150 million.
Right.
Okay. But good job besides that.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons we did request to get those collateral statements, just to see what they're buying, or what, if they're drastic changes, that would be concerning and warrant a phone call. But we did touch base with all of our banks, and they really did give us assurance that our funds are safe.
This is government-induced, what's happening, where they allow...
Microphone, Mike.
This is government-induced, where under the Dodd-Frank Act, they require all the large major banks to purchase treasuries as a safety act. But they didn't take into the point when they start raising rates, the value of the bond goes down, and as people run on the, want their money back, they have to cash them in at an inferior discount, and they're running short. So they cause their own problem.
If I could go back to that number, we have 50 million in the bank. Do we have 50 million treasury bills backing that 50 million that are ours?
Yes.
Well, what if they got a treasury bill at 1%, which they bought a lot of these at 1%, and they're paying us 3%?
That's exactly the problem, what it is. So as interest rates goes up, the value of the bond goes down. And so when they paid 1,000 a bond, maybe it's only worth
So
800 now.
Inflation and interest rates and the Fed caused their own problem. Interesting.
Right. On our collateral statement, we can only see the market value, so what it's valued as of today. We cannot see what they purchased it for. So that's, so we do not necessarily know if they're sitting on a loss, if that makes sense. But we just know that if they had to sell that, it protects our deposit.
Right, but if I'm just the run on the bank, one bank, I think we have 50 million in. If we said, give us our 50 million, they may have to sell those T-bills
At a loss.
at a loss,
But
which
we-
causes the
Right,
problem
right.
that's created. Thank you.
Yes.
To the point where they're taking a loss on government-backed treasuries. I mean, that's literally the S has hit the fan moment. Like we're not going to find a better way to collateralize this, correct? I mean, there is no other way to collateralize it. If it gets to that point, I mean, government shut down, like municipalities have shut down, like that's literally worst case scenario, correct?
I would have to confer with.
I mean, that's
Well,
literally
actually, where I was going,
just short of a nuclear bomb.
right,
going
well,
off.
where I was going, Paul, is people create this. If we all of a sudden, if we say, give us our 50 million, and everyone else said, give me their 50 million, they sell these at a loss because nobody wants to buy a T-bill at 1%. I mean, the government created the problem by requiring the T-bills, if they bought them short-term, 1 year in, they might not be as bad. But I'm concerned, I think we're all concerned that people run at the bank, or, we take that 50 million and split it up. Just a comment.
So we've invested in a number of shoe boxes that we'll start putting underneath our bed. We know that in your office, Russ, there are loose dollar bills that we'll be picking up as well. So I just want to make sure that the viewing public and the board know that to the best of our ability, these two young ladies are following it every day, and we'll get a weekly report which we'll share with you as often as we need to. And I wanted to make sure that the viewing public knows that the 9 of you, on day 1, began asking questions to me, whom of course I had asked Julie and Becky, but I don't think there's other boards of education talking about this, and I just want to make the public aware that as a result of your questioning to me, we've started this process. So, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and if the worst happens, the worst happens. I pray and hope it doesn't, but I think we're in the best place we can be right now, right, ladies?
Yeah, that's how
Okay? Thanks. If not, I have a size 11 and a half Nike box with my latest sneakers, and we can start shoving it under the bed. Thank you, guys. The final item for this evening, members of the board, is to review the agenda for March 30th. Thursday, March 30th will be our voting board meeting, and I would like to take you through the agenda items and give you explanation and hear what questions you may have. And I do want to note that we are adding one additional agenda item this evening that we'll talk about momentarily. But here we go. And we're going to do personnel in a minute, Maria. So if Maria pulls it up, if you'll pull up the agenda. On March 30th, we have a board voting meeting at 7 o'clock. We have invited Mr. Jaden Crumpler, the New York State 126-pound state wrestling champion, to be here. Mr. Contento and his two coaches, Mr. McCoy and Mr. Egan, will be here, and we'd like to present him with his wrestling singlet that is framed. We've invited his parents to come as well. And at the conclusion of the presentation to Mr. Crumplin, who has done a once in a, God, how many years have we, we've had very few state wrestling champions. At the conclusion of that presentation, Mr. Crumpler will wrestle Mr. Pareto for the ultimate title. And I'm going to put my money on Mr. Crumpler. After that, we will get into the usuals. The minutes, the approved budget transfer. We have two bids. One bid is known and one bid is not known. And I'd like Becky and Earl to be able to talk about these. The bid that's known is the recycling and trash removal services. This bid was won. The apparent low bidder was Modern, who we are currently working with. Modern has submitted a bid for the next 3 years, and we received very favorable pricing. Becky and Earl?
Well, I have the detail in front of me. We got a 3-year bid, 3-year agreement with them, and the increase was very minor. Over the course of the 3 years, we expect it to be an estimated $364,000. And the no price increase just for the trash, the recycling increased 7%.
And we had two bidders or just one?
Just one.
Just Modern, so they are the winning bidder for the trash and recycling, okay? The second bid, we don't have a name for you, and it's become a bit of a concern, but we have a suggestion for it. I'm going to let Earl talk about this. We have approximately 8 trees or tree limbs throughout the district that we feel are becoming a danger, but they are located so high in their positioning that we have an understanding of memorandum with our union that we're able to not use our in-house people, but bid it out because of safety reasons. And we also need to remove a stump or two. Earl, can you talk about where we are with this tree removal bid?
Okay, so you may have seen advertised the bid once already, and it was advertised. We had a pre-bid meeting. One vendor showed up. Nobody bid on the work. We're looking to remove 8 dead ash trees throughout the district. Plus, we're looking to trim back some, as Mr. Laurie pointed out, rather high tree limbs from the fence line at LaSalle Prep School. You might notice on the west side of the building, the trees have overgrown. They're partially owned by the neighbor. They're right on the fence line. So we relisted the bid, added some more vendors to the direct solicitation, put my name down as a point of contact for any questions. To this day, I have not received a phone call. I am concerned that we are not going to receive a good bid. We may, and I'm hopeful that we will. But if we don't, our option is, and you may see this from time to time when we do like our electrical supplies bid or our plumbing supplies bid, if none of the vendors, after it's been publicly advertised, have bid on it, we're allowed to go to open market, what we call open market. You may remember seeing that occasionally on your resolutions for approval of those two bids. That all being said, that's what Ann and I have been talking about, what that might look like for us to go to open market, because these trees are becoming a safety hazard and they need to come down. And I don't know what else to do. We've written the bid specs as best as we could without trying to be too tight or too loose. I don't know what to say. I don't know why they won't bid.
Did try contacting the city if they would be interested in helping out with shared services?
Well, we potentially could do that, but if you remember, with the ash trees in particular, the city bid those out as well. A great number of large dead ash trees in my neighborhood were taken down 2 summers ago. What Ann and I have already discussed, and Ann has already talked to their purchasing agent, is, okay, what vendor did you use? Because we're in a little bit of a conundrum. We hate to reach out to one of the bidders that we've already direct solicited and then have other bidders try to say, well, why did you use them and not us? So we're trying to be as conscientious and as fair as we can to everyone involved, but at the same time, we've got trees that are becoming a hazard that need to come down.
You know, the issue is timing too. Safety.
None of these trees are on city property, obviously.
No, sir. They're on our property. The ones along the fence line are technically on both property owners, ours and the neighbor. The accepted practice is that we can trim back to the property line. But my understanding after calling the code enforcement office, that's strictly not a best practice. It's not actually a codification in the city's laws. So we have to be careful with how we move forward.
Is there an exigency clause in our purchasing policy?
I'm sorry, I
Is
missed
there
the...
an exigency clause in our purchasing policy?
I have to be honest, Paul, I'm not familiar with that term.
Emergency,
Oh.
like is there exigent
Oh,
circumstances?
well,
that
oh yeah,
say, like,
absolutely.
you know, it looks like
If
it's
we
gonna fall
chose
down?
to, we could declare it an emergency, as you've seen me do before with like water main breaks and the gas line break at
Right.
Hyde Park School.
Yeah, we come to
things
you with a
like that.
resolution.
We
Yeah.
could come to you with a resolution, and that's one thing we may end up doing, Paul. Well, you know,
Yeah.
but,
This bid closes, if I recall, March 21st.
yes, sir.
If we receive no bids, we may be coming back to you with that kind of an arrangement, because, again, there's no one in imminent danger, but I don't want this to go on too much longer, and I believe it's 8 or 9, Earl?
I think it's actually 9.
9 trees.
Yeah.
Stump removals,
There's a couple of smaller stump removals and
not
one
as critical.
Yeah, one large one out the one side door on Independence Ave of Gaskill. No great shakes. I mean, this stuff is not high-level work. We just need to get it done.
And we don't want to put our own men and women are not at that height level, and they've admitted it.
They're not trained for that.
They're not
type of
trained.
work.
So we may be coming back to you with an emergency resolution. That's all I want to put on in your minds in case you don't see a bid here and we have to do this. I just want to set the anticipation that I'm not going to let this go very long. And yet Earl, Ann, and Becky have done their due diligence in following all the procurement rules. Thank you. We'll have a treasurer report, a budget status report, and Maria, would you be so kind as to make yourself present and share with the board the personnel reports for the month of March. Thank you.
Beginning with the certificated report, you'll see on page 1 the retirement of a pre-K teacher and the resignation of a teacher assistant at Head Start. It's too bad Mr. Zimmerman and crew had to leave because our probationary appointments, you'll see a school social worker for one of our grants, and we have hired another social worker for Gaskill Prep School. Regular substitutes, you'll see there, we have a speech teacher, counselor, and a pupil service assistant, 10 months. And then moving down to the leaves of absence, and then TRC courses, per diem, and Schedule B. There may be some additions to the report between now and the 30th, and as you know, we will star those as we always do. Classified report, you have the retirement of a general laborer, the resignation of a school monitor lunch and a safety officer, no terminations, some probationary promotional appointments, senior general repairer, 2 general repairers, 2 12-month nurses, and 2 part-time cleaners. You also see the temporary appointment of an assistant child care associate at Maple Avenue, an involuntary transfer, leaves of absence, and some additional names for after-school activities. Does anybody have any questions about the report?
I do, Maria. I'm not sure if I ask it the right way. I'm under the impression, I don't know if it's correct or not, that we give a leave of absence for up to a year if people are taking another job somewhere else.
We do.
And is that causing a substitute to fill the job? Because I understand people won't take the job, they're going somewhere else because the person could come back and they're on the street.
Well, for the most part, we haven't had any trouble filling our positions because we're very upfront in explaining to folks that they're holding a job temporarily for somebody else. One of the things that we are very fortunate about, especially when we're looking at our teacher's contract, is that teachers who are on leave, have to notify us by April 1st if they're going to be coming back in the following year. And if they do not, then they have to be out for the whole year. So the point is that when we have somebody who's out, we're able to at least tell them that they're going to have at least another full year of employment if the person doesn't tell us by April 1st that they'll be back in September. So I understand what you're saying. We are not having trouble filling those vacancies at this time. So that doesn't mean that tomorrow we wouldn't. I'm just saying that there are safeguards in place in our contracts that allow us to be able to give people who are thinking about coming to work for us an idea about how they would be put on the street, so to speak. Or if they would be put on the street, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
If you don't mind if I continue this conversation? Because it's been on my mind too, and I like to think that this Board of Education is very generous in the fact that we give 1 year leave of absences. We have. And he's whispering to me right now. And I don't know. I think you probably look around and talk, because I know you deal with a lot of other human resource people and employees. Is that a common clause or a common board practice, would you say, Maria?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. Especially,
I believe it's a practice.
it's a practice.
not
It
a
is
policy,
not a policy. It is in our contract with the teachers that we allow the educational leave or the opportunity to take a leave for purposes other than even employment. As I mentioned, there are safeguards in that contract. For our other units, it is not as defined in their collective bargaining agreements, and it is a practice that we have followed for a number of years.
You lost me on that one. So it's
Well-
in the contract that they can take a leave to go take
Yes.
another job?
Yeah, no, it doesn't say specifically to take another job, but there are various types of leaves that are allowed. One of those is educational. One of those is to run for office if they
No,
wanted
no,
to run for
I
office.
get that, but.
You're talking about a
I'm
very
talking about,
particular leave.
I'm a teacher and I want to go to work at Newport.
Right, no, that
That's
is
not
not
in there.
specifically written in their contract.
But we're being gracious and doing it for a year?
We are.
Okay.
With the understanding
By
that
April.
we need to know by April 1 whether they'll be back in September, no matter when they start the leave. So in the case of a recent leave that we have that you may be a little bit familiar with because you're seeing the regular substitute on here replacing that person knows that they're responsible to let us know by April 1st whether they'll be back next year, or we know we have a vacancy for all of next year.
Maria, what if they say yes by April 1st and then renege on it in August? Has that ever happened?
Well, it's never happened, but that's a really tough spot to put the district in, and then Mr. Laurie would have to really make a determination about what we were going to do. I mean, obviously, the goal is never to put a teacher that leaves a position with another district or another agency out on the street after they've come and committed to us. But on the flip side of that, another thing that I think plays in our favor in this is, and it's happened before, if we get somebody in on a regular substitute contract and we hire them from March to June, and they really aren't very good. Now, we hope that that's not the case, but we don't have to continue their employment. We don't have to continue their employment. So it cuts both ways. It's a sword that cuts both ways. So the district isn't totally unprotected, even though we don't want to make a practice of putting teachers on the street.
Would you say the majority of these leaves of absences, these longer term ones, are more medical or maternity rather than seeking employment elsewhere and trying to hold a position?
So there's two separate issues there, because I know Mr. Petrosi just asked about the leave for a particular purpose, because we have come up against some individuals who are seeking employment elsewhere, maybe not even in the education field, but looking to other fields to move into, looking for that soft landing place in case they don't like where they're going. And it's come both ways for us. We've had people leave permanently after they've done that, and then we've had people seek greener pastures and find their way back. So it cuts both ways. What you're talking about in terms of long-term absences and long-term leaves, this year, and in one sense, I think this is a very good thing. We have many maternities, a lot of new students. You know, in a few
Future
years,
students.
we have a lot of new future students. Those maternity leaves have been extended, not only extending their maternity leave, but then extending into child rearing. And in our NFT collective bargaining agreement, there is up to a 2-year leave for child rearing. So some of those leaves do get extended. And again, it's not a bad thing because it gives us the opportunity to get good looks at future teachers as well.
Thanks, Maria. It's a good conversation. Just one question, because I sometimes struggle with it, and I know you've been asked this twice this week about paternity leaves. Can you talk about paternity leaves just for a minute? Because I was asked twice by different people about paternity leaves.
So one of the reasons why we're asked for paternity leaves is because of the New York State law that allows for that disability leave, but that's for private employers. And it allows for private employers and public employers, if they negotiate it into their collective bargaining agreements, it allows for employees to contribute a portion of their salary for a disability, which could include a maternity and or a paternity leave. Our collective bargaining agreements do not address paternity leaves. There is no prohibition for our collective bargaining agreements to not address them. So we are not running afoul of anything right now. What we have allowed our fathers to do, if they've requested to do so, is to use all of their illness time that they have with the appropriate request to the superintendent as family illness time, and then they can use whatever leave time they have to stay at home for that particular period of time and get paid. Any employee at any time is allowed to put in FMLA paperwork, which is Family Medical Leave paperwork. They can do it for purposes of having a child, and that's 12 weeks unpaid leave. So what we're talking really about here when we're talking about paternity leave is paid leave, and that's what we don't particularly address for fathers in our collective bargaining agreements. Okay.
It's great answers, great information, and it's come up a couple times, right? You've had to deal with this a couple times, so.
And we always do try to be accommodating, just so I don't want anybody to think that we're telling fathers, well, no, you don't need the time. If they have leave time and they're requesting to use their leave time for the purposes of having a child or adopting a child, they're allowed to do so by calling it family illness leave.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much. We have our preschool reports. We have some short-term contracts, and they're interestingly, because Father and Son Center is youth mentoring at the prep schools. This happened at Gaskill, now it's going to LaSalle. Cortez Bradbury is a police officer, school resource officer. He has started a bowling club with staff at Abbott and Cataract. He has 35 students at each school. He is doing that sport they allege is bowling, and I think when Lynn Tompkins was here, she said she had 100 requests and had to narrow it down to 35 kids from her school to bowl. And he's a fine young man, a graduate, a good bowler, and he's been working with our kids after school. Windsor Learning is interesting. Windsor Learning is a contract that Rick could speak to a little bit more, but you have and will see continuous reference now to something called the science of learning. The science of learning. And really, it's really starting to sweep Western New York. And it really is looking to see how much phonics-based teaching we do. And I want to report, and I'll have Rick report even more thoroughly, that we do have a phonics-based approach. We have a responsive reading approach. And Windsor Learning is in that vein. Is there anything more you could add for those that will watch this, Rick, on why we're doing Windsor Learning?
Yes. Windsor Learning is part of our response to intervention program. If a student is struggling to read during regular classroom instruction, then they get extra instruction during the school day by a specialist that meets their needs in a small group. So we have a variety of different program materials that we use. Windsor Learning is one of them. Is the superintendent said, it is a phonic-based approach. It's aligned with the science of reading. We adopted it about 1.5 years ago with our ARP funds when we were looking to address COVID learning loss. We wanted to expand the number of different programs that we had and update our RTI resources. So this is continued training in order for our interventionists to use the program, primarily because we've had some turnover. You were just talking about maternity leaves, and a lot of our interventionists are certified teachers working in the intervention program, but often when substitute opportunities come along, they are placed in longer-term teaching assignments. So new folks come in behind them. So we have a tremendous need for continuous training, and this contract is part of that.
And I'm spending a little bit more time on this than I normally would, but I was interviewed on the radio a couple of days ago about the science of learning, and the fact that there was a Gazette article, column published over a week ago that talked about our responses to teaching reading, and that we used a balanced literacy approach. Am I saying that correctly? And we do. But in a balanced literacy approach, I would rather call it a responsive literacy approach. Every kid, every one of us needs a different tool to help us learn, especially young children who haven't learned. But what I want to say unequivocally into the microphone, because I know there are those watching us right now, in Niagara Falls City School District, we do use what I would prefer to call a responsive learning approach to reading that does include the teaching of phonics. This board has heard presentations on a program called Foundations. This board has heard and approved contracts for a program called Orton-Gillingham. And tonight, this board, on the 30th, this board will again be asked to approve some money for training in Windsor. Those all revolve around the teaching of phonics and the retraining of teachers. So for those listening, and I know I will get phone calls tomorrow, we do have a responsive reading program that is balanced, but does include the teaching of phonics. You will start to see many news articles coming up about that question. Did I capture that correctly, Rick? And he knows it way better than I do. So
We have a phonics program that's based on Orton-Gillingham. It's called Foundations, which you mentioned. It's from Wilson Learning. And again, it is aligned with the science of reading. It is a very strong program. We teach it every day in our primary classrooms, grades K1 and 2.
As a matter of fact, I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No. We also have the other reading program at PEP, right? Does that also include the phonics program for kids who are behind?
Yes.
So, in other words, we are doing our due diligence with the teacher.
Yes. Yeah, we call that double dosing. So often when a student needs extra help, they do need help. They need an overabundance of phonics instruction. So Windsor Learning is another program that we use to provide that.
You know what, I'm starting to think, Rick, Mr. Villardo might be a nice replacement for you at some point. So
It's his attendance at the district parent group.
Well, that's right, because you go to the district parent committee.
Yeah, well, I'm not equipped to do a ricochet.
But I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I'm making a point for the public here. And you're right, very astutely, Mr. Villardo, the double dose that Rick was talking about includes phonics. So I just kind of want to clear the air on that. That's all. That's why we did it. You're welcome, and thank you for bringing that up. We have another one of the response programs that Mr. Zimmerman talked about with Reverend Copeland. Kimberly Gingrich, we have a special needs child that is bilingual. I think you've heard this from us before. We need to interpret the language. That's why that's a contract for a special needs child. Then we have tomorrow is a conference day, and we're offering some services through the Teacher Resource Center money. That would be 7, 8, and 9, and 10. That is Teacher Resource Center money that's been approved by the Teacher Resource Center Board, and that's part of tomorrow late afternoon's work. If you move ahead, Ray, and go to 601, we are accepting $335,786 for a Stop School Violence program that's run by Ms. Jones, Mr. Corella, and Mr. Chief Del Porto. That is for threat assessments and other activities. The Head Start application is not money. They approved our Head Start money. Now they just need to approve our narrative and see that you saw that. 603 is for additional money for Head Start. It is $86,023 for Head Start and $38,442 for early Head Start, meaning the 1 or 2-year-olds. The COLA is a cost of living increase they gave us on top of our allocation. The real property tax report card, Becky or Julie, anything for the board, how does that work, just so everyone's aware?
Yes, we'll be presenting the real property tax report card on the 30th.
Turn it on, Joe.
Yeah. We'll be presenting the real property tax report card the next meeting on the 30th, and we'll just attach it to the back of the resolution. And it gets adopted that night, and then we submit it in the portal the next day.
Something that we have to do. 605 is I'm ready. I'm ready with the budget on the 30th. I'm ready. I'm hoping that the governor's ready. Niagara Falls is ready. I'm ready with the budget. You've heard it for the last couple of weeks. Julie, Becky, myself will watch over the next 2 weeks. Something changes, we'll let you know, but I'm ready to present it, and we're ready to go, and I think we're in good shape. 606, 607, 608 are all Miss Judy Glasser. And Judy, would you like to make any comments on 6, 7, or 8?
They're all pretty standard, your election inspectors, your additional election inspectors, because inevitably there were some scheduled who at the end won't be able to make it. And then your machine custodians that help us with any problem with the machine. So it's all very standard.
Okay. 609, Becky, these are, we collect money for non-resident and private school students or parochial students. Can you explain to the board, just in a minute, what that is?
Yep, this is routine. We charge other districts for health services provided by us for their students in our parochial schools and other placements within our district. And we pay other districts for our students attending in their districts as well.
610 is for one student. This student has been going, this is a highly involved special needs student who has been in this district. The parents, through a CSE meeting, a Committee on Special Education meeting, asked for us to allow him to complete his year in Oakfield,
Alabama from Lockport, and they asked that he be allowed to stay.
He's a severely involved special education, special needs student, and for his betterment at the CSE meeting, we thought did not disrupt his education for the remainder of this year. 611 is something that Derek talked about. They're bringing yoga in their after-school program. This is for the middle schools. They're going to be doing yoga as one of his offerings. 612 is an additional contract with Chef Bobby Anderson. This contract is specifically for our PTE students, our alternative pathway students at the high school. He will take and instruct those that are interested from the PTE program only in culinary. 613, you've heard the community come to you for more culturally responsive art in our schools, particularly our high school. So we've decided to contract with a professional organization, the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area, to provide culturally responsive art and tours of that art to be placed throughout Niagara Falls High School. These are works of art that reflect Black and brown individuals who have done great things, who you've heard many times speakers speak about, that we need to represent kids that look like our we need to represent figures of influence who look like our students. So instead of taking this on ourselves, that's what this National Heritage Area does. It's run by a fine person named Sarah Capon. If you know Sarah, she runs this organization and will outfit Niagara Falls High School with an assortment of beautiful paintings and pictures of historically significant Black and brown individuals. 614, Rebecca, would you talk about Drescher and Malecki?
Drescher and Malecki has served as our external auditors. Their last engagement for the last fiscal year, they've completed that and their contract was up. We did participate in an Erie Wombosi's bid, or an RFP, for external auditing services. 4 respondents, 2 chose not to bid on Niagara Falls. The 2 that did, we are recommending Drescher and Malecki for that. And the audit committee did review that proposal, and I think that they have a recommendation for you.
So the audit committee is saying that we continue with Drescher and Malecki. However, the principal auditor will change. You're used to seeing Matt Montalvo here, and again, we've talked about this in audit committee. We're going to have a new member of their team do that audit, but we are still recommending we stay with Drescher and Malecki. 615, I'm going to rely on Earl, even though I know well what it is, and you see it in the budget at $212,000. But every 5 years, New York State requires us to do a full building condition survey, done with an architect and a stamp. They need to start this survey of all of our buildings this summer so that we meet the deadline of March of '24 to get it completed. Earl, would you like to comment on the building condition survey?
So as Mr. Laurie said, this is a state requirement. We have to do it once every 5 years. And it's been more than 5 years since our last one. You may or may not remember, and that is because the state started to stagger when the building condition surveys were due, because doing it for the entire state every 5 years, you couldn't buy an architectural firm. They were all booking up to try to do it. There's just not enough capacity in the state in architectural firms. So we are now doing it for this year. It has to be completed by the end of the year, the survey that is, and then it has to be inputted into the CDOS portal by March 1st of 2024. We will work with the buildings, district-wide safety committee as part of this, and all of the building principals as well.
Our recommended agency is Clark Patterson Lee. Brian Trott is the principal. You've met Brian on a number of occasions. They know our buildings, they know our district. Our expectation is that they lift every ceiling tile in all rooms to make sure that they don't miss anything. And what this document does is, when we go for the next capital project, 5 years from this one, anything that we ask to have improved upon should be on that survey. So when I present in 5 years to you the next capital project, everything has to line up and be on this building condition survey.
Yes.
How long does the survey take to complete?
Months. There are 128 line items per building. And basically what you do, Mr. Velardo, is...
Well, it has to be some different lines, but like the fire inspection survey.
Yes, sir.
Same outline.
Yes, it's just, it takes in all aspects of the building, structurally and all.
It's massive. And Clark Patterson Lee's price, Becky, the price was below it was off state contract, below the state contract.
Yes, their pricing came in at 5 cents a square foot.
God bless you.
For the basic building condition survey, and the other lowest bid price on that RFP was 6 cents a square foot.
So we got a penny off on the square footage, and that's not the only reason, but it is a good price. And Clark Patterson Lee, you are all familiar with, and we're fairly satisfied with them. So I'm pleased to present that to you. 616. We would like to purchase 2 more Evolve walkthrough systems. And they've been very successful, by the way. Very, very happy with the work. But let me tell you why. We are putting in secure vestibules, and we're going to put a secured vestibule in here, this building. This building does not have an Evolve system, and we have visitors during the day. And we have visitors at board meetings. And we have very nice visitors come, but I feel that we should have that same level of security at this building. The second one is going to go to Niagara Falls High School, because here's what's happening. We have so many outside events going on at Niagara Falls High School that what happens is that we've got a couple of good safety officers that are wheeling the ones from the front door down to door 3. You know where door 3 is. That's where you come in with the basketball games. That's where you'll come in with the meat raffle. And we're worried that we're moving that an awful lot. And we think that it would be advantageous to have a permanently stationed one there. So we're asking to purchase 2 more of those evolved weapons detection systems, one for this building, because it's going to get a secured vestibule, and one additional one for Niagara Falls High School, mainly for outside events, but it will be housed at door number 3 because there's so much foot traffic there, and we just don't want to move these things too much and violate any warranty. Yes, Cheryl.
Have we considered placing additional units in some of the schools where they use like the side door as opposed?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Yes, that is something that we're studying right now. I think we have a good number of them, but as we analyze it, we may come back to you again for 1 or 2 at certain locations in schools. I have to tell you, I'm nothing short of pleased with them, and the community is getting very used to them. So yes, the answer is yes. This initial purchase is for those 2 locations, but I will be updating you on maybe a couple of additional ones next year. The final resolution was not on your original packet, but we have discussed this in executive session. It is for an additional retainer for legal services with respect to the Child Victims Act. And I'm going to leave it there unless there's something else, Mr. Massaro, you think we need to add.
No, we did meet the concern of the board with the attorneys for LG 61, which involved the teacher practice. And when we first presented it to the board, it was open-ended. We were able to secure in the board's assistance a cap figure of $75,000, which will bring us to the courtroom steps of the trial itself. And as you'll recall, the New York attorneys had $80,000 for the same type of work up to the permanent trial. And they work here against hourly rates, which are a little more favorable than their regular hourly rates. Usually they are akin to the hourly rates that they charge. We would like, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. President, authority to sign the contracts this evening, even though the formal vote will be the 30th, because they really have to get working on the 2 cases.
So that's on there for formal approval. I'm sure you can see Mr. Petrosi after the meeting going forward on signatures.
There's a resolution that I don't know if they were distributed.
Judy has them, if you'd like to distribute them, Jude. Yeah, I'd be happy to do it if you want me to.
Any
I don't
colleagues,
know
would that be okay with you?
The contracts are attached to the resolution for your records.
That's good.
Thank you.
Colleagues, well, you're okay with me signing that tonight so they could get to work tomorrow? Mike, Clara?
We've spoken about this. Thank you very much.
It was as we required.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. There is one policy. This is for Head Start. The Head Start board is very different than all our boards, but we've got to show a policy that talks about mitigation of any COVID spread. It doesn't force anyone to wear any mask or do anything different, but the Head Start board is asking us for a policy on health mitigation, and you certainly can table that for 30 days, and we'll propose it. There'll be the oral communications. If you would go to the first screen, Ray, on the on the agenda. Next month, on the 30th, we'll begin at 5:30. We haven't done this in a while. We'll update you on capital projects. We received approval and building permits for HVAC work at Bond, Kelfis, and Niagara Falls High School. Yeah, the woohoo is special because remember, this is with ARP money, and this has to be done by September of 2024. Final shot at the budget. We'll review the agenda, and then there's a regular board meeting. At that meeting, members of the board, we will need an executive session, but I'll talk to you more about it that night. That is our outlook for the 30th, unless there are questions.
Mr. Laurie?
Yeah.
Mr. Kinsemi?
I couldn't tell. Hey.
6.17.
Yes.
Is that in my packet? Is that a separate piece that's been put on the agenda?
Yeah, you know what, Mr. Kinsemi, it is not in your packet. We will have that dropped off for you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No, it is. You're correct. It is not. We just brought that forward this evening. I am. I gotta. If there are no other questions, I have about 4 updates, and I'm done for the evening, members of the board. So is that okay if I proceed? Thank you. First of all, Mr. Bass, I'd like to say happy birthday to you. You look very good for 29. 35. Yeah. Well, you look very good. Just so y'all know, tonight, and it's just concluding, and I have pictures from Chief Del Porto, the Niagara Falls Police SWAT team drilled at 79th Street School. Why that is important is because now the police department SWAT team has drilled at every school. And on April 3rd, we're going to have a full active shooter drill. Students aren't in, but we're going to do a full active shooter drill. I want to also tell you, I talked about the science of reading. I also would like to tell you that on the 18th of April, for the last time, we'll do our Dr. Martin Luther King Awards in April. Next year, we will go back to January. But there was a committee of people, recommendations were held, and the following people will be recognized at the Martin Luther King celebration at Bond School. The Bond singers will sing. Dr. Wingert from Gaskill will bring his chorus. And the following people will be recognized. Michael Williamson of the Williamson Funeral Home. Our very own Dorothy Brundage, who has done a lot of outreach in the community. And the Niagara Falls Firefighters Toy Fund Committee, who have done a lot for those that don't have a lot. And we wanted to recognize the Toy Fund leaders. Along with that, most importantly, not to diminish those other groups, but 2 Niagara Falls High School students. I'm doing my best here. Aisha McKama and Rayoma Nickens will be awarded. They were selected by their principals. So we'll award 5 different individuals and more to come. My last announcement is to just read a couple of things to you. And I'll start with the good one and then end with a good one. Last week on Saturday, our robotics teams competed in the state for the state championship. And our robotics program qualified this year 5 teams to represent us in the world championships. We're sending them to Dallas, Texas, April 28th through May 3rd, along with a lot of teachers and coaches. And the first email I'm going to read for you is from one of the judges. His name is Paul Holsinger. He is a judge. Mr. Laurie, I want to write to congratulate you on your VEX IQ robotics team for their performance in the New York State Championship this past week. The students and the school have developed an incredibly high standard and have such high potential. One team in particular, French Toast Mafia, has 3 young ladies who have such high character, community engagement, and enthusiasm for STEM that they were worthy of the Excellence Award for the whole state. These are 3 of our LaSalle young ladies. That's super awesome. In addition to that, I'd like to read to you another email that I received this week. And this is from a gentleman, I won't use his name, but he is a doctor, a PhD. He is a parent of a child who participated on another team. And I'm going to read this to you because I want you to hear what certain people think of Niagara Falls. Dear Mr. Laurie, my name is, I won't dignify reading his name. On March 11th, I attended the New York State VEX IQ Championship with my son's team, and I want to share my impression with you. In the championship, LaSalle Prep School showed much better results than the teams from anywhere else in the state. However, I have a concern. Your team has been using robots at a very high level of complexity. This phenomenon cannot be explained by the fact that children from LaSalle are simply smarter than children from other schools, or that they are developing more time for their robots. There is only one satisfactory reason or explanation that LaSalle teams are succeeding. They are using a highly trained adult engineer to craft their robots. And this opinion is shared by many coaches and parents that I spoke to. I understand that they have a great team and that LaSalle promotes this very hard. But you have created a toxic environment for children. The lesson that they're learning by using a professional expert to create their robot is certainly at an unfair price to their development. I do not think your goal of winning at any cost is a good way to lead children. Tournaments have prestige, and you have none. Therefore, I urge you, the school principal, and everyone involved, to stop using professional engineers to create robots. Unfortunately, I can't congratulate you or your team on the victory. If you did it fairly and didn't use adults to do this, I would congratulate you. Sincerely, a name I'll never use. Now, why do I read that? Because that's how some people think about our kids in our city. The utter despicable disrespect they show because they don't believe our kids can do things. To take time to write that to me and accuse us of cheating, I'm just appalled. I'm appalled, and I hope that the gentleman from Ithaca gets to see this tape and knows that I read that into the public record. You couldn't be further from the truth. That couldn't be further from the truth. You couldn't be more misguided, and you couldn't display more unsportsmanship behavior than anything I can think of. The students from LaSalle Prep School in the robotics championships did it by themselves because the students from LaSalle, Gaskill, Niagara Falls High School, and the 8 elementary schools are just as smart, just as talented, just as creative, and just as ingenious as people from Ithaca or anywhere else in the state. I unequivocally tell you they did not cheat. They did it because they work hard, they have good parents, and they represent a good school district. I'm appalled to have read that, but I want everybody to know how I feel and how I believe this board feels that you've disrespected our students and our city. I won't dignify it with one more minute of comment other than to say, LaSalle Prep students, you keep going and you keep doing what you're doing. We are behind you 100%, and we can't wait till you go to show the world in Dallas. Congratulations and good luck. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say, Mr. Petrosi and members of the board. I thought it was a good meeting, and we have completed everything we need to.
Anything from anyone? Thank you. Anyone? Thank you. Saying that, good night, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.